When the city sleeps beneath the statue's shadow, something else awakens. Christ the Redeemer weeps. Maria Santos had climbed Corcovado Mountain hundreds of instances as an excursion guide, but she'd by no means seen Cristo Redentor, Christ the Redeemer, cry earlier than. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in January, and Maria turned into the best character on the mountain. She'd come to image the statue at night time for a tourism campaign, special permission granted by means of the Archdiocese. The massive Art Deco Christ stood with hands outstretched, 98 ft of soapstone and concrete overlooking Rio de Janeiro, one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Through her digicam lens, she saw moisture jogging down the statue's face. Now not rain, the nighttime turned into clean, stars amazing above the mountain. No longer condensation, the air became heat, humid however no longer wet. This became water flowing from the statue's eyes like tears, pooling at its FT, walking down the pedestal in rivulets that stuck moonlight. Maria reduced her camera, starring. The statue became crying, not possible but undeniable. She approached the base, achieving out to touch the water. It changed into heat, frame temperature, and had a faint metallic odor, like blood diluted in water. She pulled her hand, returned fast, her coronary heart racing. Just mineral deposits, she advised herself. Moisture leaching through the stone, nothing supernatural. But her voice sounded thin and unconvincing within the pre-dawn silence. A legitimate behind her made her spin round. Nothing there, simply the statement platform, the closed chapel, the darkened tourist center. However, she'd heard something. Footsteps on stone, respiratory. Allah, she called out. Hello, is a person there? The metropolis lighting unfold beneath, Rio de Janeiro glittering like a fallen constellation, Copacabana, Ipanema, the favelas climbing hillsides, the bay reflecting moonlight. From up right here, it all seemed peaceful, beautiful, best. However, something was incorrect. Maria felt it in her bones, a wrongness that radiated from the weeping statue behind her. She turned lower back to Cristo Redentor and noticed something that made her blood freeze. The statue's head had moved, just barely, a few stages. However, it had in reality moved. It become not searching out over the city, however, down at her, the face that had been serene now seeming sorrowful, anguished. Maria's camera fell from nerveless arms, the lens shattering on stone. She backed away, unable to look far away from the statue's face. The eyes carved, expressionless stone, regarded to be clearly seeing her now, tracking her movement. Vocer vero qua European vigo, a voice whispered. Do you spot what I see? Maria spun around. A person stood close to the chapel front, aged, sporting the robes of a clergyman, his face coated with age and sorrow. Padre, Maria's voice shook. What are you doing right here? The mountain is closed. I am constantly here, the priest said. I've been right here in view at the start since 1931 while the statue become completed. I watched them construct it, stone by way of stone, prayer by using prayer. And I watched because it started to alternate. Alternate how? The priest approached, his actions stiff, as if his joints pained him. Cristo Redentor changed into constructed as an image, hands open, welcoming, blessing the town beneath. However, symbols are powerful. They turn out to be what human beings make them. And for 90 years, human beings have come here with their prayers, their hopes, their determined pleas. Millions of prayers, everyone leaving a mark, a weight. The statue has absorbed them all. That is now not viable. It's simply stone and urban. Is it? The priest gestured on the weeping statue. Study it, in reality look. Tell me what you spot. Maria seemed. In the moonlight, Cristo Redentor regarded much less like a statue and greater like something alive, something bearing an insufferable weight. The outstretched arms regarded strained, as if keeping up an invisible burden. The serene face now regarded anguished, the carved functions expressing pain that should not be possible in useless stone. The statue is dying, the priest said quietly. Or alternatively, it is drowning in prayers, in grief, in all the struggling of this metropolis. Each prayer for the unwell, every plea for the missing, each desperate cry from the favelas, the statue absorbs all of them. It changed into supposed to bless Rio. As an alternative, it has grown to be Rio's confessor, its witness, its repository of pain. "You are insane," Maria stated, but she turned into backing away, shifting toward the steps that would take her down the mountain, far away from the weeping statue and the mad priest. "Wait," the priest's voice changed into sharp with urgency. "You need to apprehend. The statue is attaining its limit. 90 years of accrued suffering, hundreds of thousands of prayers unanswered, all that pain compressed into stone. Quickly it's going to crack, and whilst it does..." The ground trembled, just slightly, however enough to make Maria stumble. Cristo Redentor shuddered, and the tears flowing from its eyes had become a torrent, water gushing down the face, flooding throughout the platform. "It's beginning," the priest whispered. "The breaking." Cracks regarded within the statue's floor, hairline fractures spreading throughout the soapstone, spiderwebbing up the arms, throughout the chest, through the face. And from the ones cracks came sounds. Voices, lots of them, overlapping, crying out in Portuguese, Spanish, languages Maria did not apprehend. They have been the prayers, the accumulated pleas of 90 years, trapped in stone, sooner or later locating launch. Maria heard them simply now. "Poor favor, treatment minha filha, please heal my daughter. Tragem u filho de volta, deliver my son returned. Ajud nos, assist us. Salve nos, store us." Limitless, desperate voices, every one a moment of human suffering compressed into the statue's structure. "Cover your ears," the priest shouted, but it was too overdue. The voices flooded into Maria's thoughts, overwhelming her with their grief. She felt every prayer as though it had been her own. The mom's pain for her ill infant, the daddy's desperation for his missing son, the grandmother's plea for safety, the younger girl's prayer for breakout from violence. 90 years of Rio's struggling poured into her awareness unexpectedly, and Maria collapsed, screaming. When she opened her eyes, the solar turned into growing. She lay at the statement platform, her body aching, her mind uncooked from the psychic assault. The priest knelt beside her, searching older come what may, more worn out. "I am sorry," he stated. "I attempted to provide you with a warning. The statue releases stress periodically, expels a number of the accumulated prayers to save you total fracture. You have been here while it happened. You absorbed a number of what it become maintaining." Maria sat up slowly, her head spinning. Cristo Redentor stood as it constantly had, palms outstretched, face serene, showing no symptoms of cracks or tears. However Maria should experience it now, could sense the load it carried, the sea of suffering contained within the stone. "How do you understand all this?" she requested the priest. "Because I was the first," he said unfortunately. "The primary character to realize what the statue changed into turning into. I was younger then, newly ordained, assigned to the chapel here. I noticed the changes, diffused at the start, then impossible to ignore. The statue soaking up prayers like a sponge, the burden of them making the stone groan at night, the tears that might drift in the course of storms or on in particular sorrowful days. Why didn't you tell everybody?" "I did. The church dismissed it as pressure, as creativeness. They reassigned me, but I kept returning. I couldn't depart. The statue had taken my first prayer too, you see, a prayer for my dying sister. She died besides, and my grief became part of the stone. I have been certain to it ever due to the fact that, unable to depart, getting old but now not demise, looking because the statue accumulates an increasing number of pain." Maria checked out the priest more carefully. His gowns had been historic, the fashion from many years in the past. His pores and skin turned into translucent, nearly spectral within the dawn mild. "How antique are you?" "I used to be 28 in 1931. You do the mathematics." "It's not possible. You'd be over 100. 121, the priest confirmed. "The statue maintains me here. I'm part of its shape now, another layer of prayer and pain. When it subsequently breaks, and it's going to break, I'll be released. All of us will. Every soul it really is sure their grief to this monument might be freed suddenly." "What takes place then?" The priest looked out over Rio, the metropolis waking underneath them, hundreds of thousands of humans beginning every other day. Believe 90 years of accrued struggling launched concurrently. Each prayer, each plea, each second of desperation and grief exploding outward in a psychic wave. It will hit Rio first, then spread, a tsunami of discomfort with a view to overwhelm each thought it touches. People will revel in no longer simply their personal ache, but all people's ache abruptly. The town will tear itself aside. Maria stood, legs shaky. There has to be a way to save you it, to release the stress steadily, too. There was, the priest interrupted. The statue turned into alleged to be renewed each 30 years. Not bodily rebuilt, however spiritually cleansed, a primary ceremony, prayers of thanksgiving in place of desperation, pleasure to counterbalance the grief. It turned into achieved in 1961. Deliberate for 1991, but by no means passed off, political instability, church forms. The renewal rite become forgotten. So we do it now. We prepare the rite, we cleanse the statue. It is too overdue. The cracks have began. The statue held too much for too long. A rite now might be like looking to empty the sea with a cup. The priest's eyes have been ancient, sad beyond measure. I've attempted the whole thing. I've prayed, I have done every ritual I recognize. Nothing works. The statue is going to interrupt, Maria. The simplest query is when. Maria descended the mountain as tourists commenced arriving for the day's first visits. She regarded back once at Cristo Redentor, standing with fingers wide, blessing the town below. To everybody else, it was only a statue, astounding, iconic, an image of peace and welcome. Handiest Maria should see the cracks now, invisible however gift, spiderwebbing via the soapstone. Best she could hear the faint whisper of voices trapped in stone. Simplest she ought to sense the horrible pressure constructing, the collected weight of 90 years of unanswered prayers geared up to explode. She went to the archdiocese, attempted to give an explanation for. They listened with politeness, then cautioned she take some time off, perhaps see a therapist. Stress was commonplace among excursion publications, they stated. The altitude, the steady crowds, the responsibility, it could weigh down every person. She went to structural engineers, showed them her pics from that night. The photos showed not anything uncommon. No tears, no cracks, no signs of stress. Anything changed into going on to Cristo Redentor wasn't bodily in the traditional experience. She went to anthropologists, folklorists, everyone who may recognize how symbols could turn out to be bins for collective emotion. A few had been involved academically, but no person believed the statue became an impending risk of catastrophic failure. Maria again to Corcovado mountain night time after night, every so often along with her digicam, every so often simply to watch. The priest changed into usually there, retaining his everlasting vigil. The tears endured, flowing extra closely each night. The cracks spread, visible now to Maria's skilled eye even though no one else ought to see them. How long? She asked the priest one night time. Days, maybe per week. The statue held through carnival, all that joy, all that party helped stability the grief. But now, he gestured on the city below. Rio is a town of extremes, high-quality joy and incredible sorrow, current aspect by using aspect. The favelas grow, violence will increase, desperation deepens. Each prayer of pain adds to the weight. The statue cannot preserve a great deal longer. What will you do whilst it breaks? I'll in the end be released, finally die after 93 years of looking and waiting. The priest smiled regrettably. I used to assume it'd be comfort. Now I am now not certain. I have been certain to this stone so long, I don't know if I exist other than it anymore. Maria spent her days seeking to warn people, to evacuate the town, to put together for the approaching catastrophe. No one listened. She became classified loopy, conspiracy theorist, affected by a breakdown. She lost her process as a tour guide. Her family stopped answering her calls. But she saved watching, stored waiting, saved documenting the statue's deterioration in journals no person might examine, photographs nobody could believe. One night time, precisely 1 week after she'd first visible the tears, Maria was at the mountain when the priest approached her with uncommon urgency. It's this night, he stated. I will feel it. The statue's shape is at its absolute restriction. One extra prayer of desperation, one more plea for help, and it will fracture absolutely. Can we do whatever? Yes, The priest took her hand. His pores and skin became bloodless, insubstantial, barely there. "We may be right here, undergo witness, and perhaps, if we're lucky, we can take in a number of the release, channel it via ourselves instead of letting it explode outward. It will kill us, but it'd shop the metropolis." "That's insane." "Yes, but you got here back every night. You believed when no person else would. You saw what turned into going on. You are certain to the statue now too, whether you intended to be or no longer. Your grief, your frustration at being overlooked, it's in the stone alongside everybody else's." Maria knew he'd become proper. She may want to sense her connection to Cristo Redentor now, may want to sense her own prayers for understanding, for someone to listen, for the metropolis to be stored, woven into its structure. What do we do? We pray, but no longer prayers of desperation, prayers of attractiveness, prayers of release. We provide the statue permission to let cross, and we provide to carry what it holds. The priest placed himself on the statue's feet, putting his hands against the stone. "Come, be part of me." Maria knelt beside him, setting her arms at the pedestal. The stone turned into warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. She may want to feel the sea of grief within it, should sense the prayers of tens of millions, the accumulated struggling of decades. They started to wish together, words in Portuguese flowing among them. No longer pleas for help, but acknowledgments of pain. Not requests for intervention, however reputation of suffering as a part of the human circumstance. And Cristo Redentor spoke back. The tears became a flood, water pouring from the statue's eyes, mouth, the tips of its fingers. The cracks blazed with light, not bodily light, but something else, something religious, visible simplest to folks that knew to look for it. The voices started out to pour out, now not simply heard, however felt, experienced. Maria absorbed them, allowed them to float through her recognition. Each prayer became a lifestyle's, a moment of desperation, a cry for assist that went unanswered. She felt them all, held them for just a moment earlier than liberating them to the night time. The priest did the same, his historic body glowing with the collected grief of 93 years of vigil. He turned into laughing and crying concurrently, finally unburdened after many years of bearing witness. The statue cracked, a sound like thunder, just like the global breaking. However, in preference to exploding outward, the release flowed through Maria and the priest, earthing itself via their bodies like lightning through a rod. They screamed as many years of struggling poured through them, experiencing lifetimes of pain in seconds. Maria felt her body failing, her heart struggling underneath the psychic weight. She became dying, she knew, burning out like a fuse, sacrificing herself to save you the metropolis below from experiencing this unbearable tsunami of grief. Beside her, the priest blazed with light, his frame becoming translucent, finally liberating its grip on bodily form after 93 years of not possible life. He smiled at Maria, his face younger once more, as it were in 1931. "Thanks," he whispered, "for believing, for seeing, for being right here." Then he turned into long gone, dissolving into light, released at final. Maria hung on a moment longer, channeling the closing of the release, feeling the statue's shape stabilize because it expelled the very last prayers. Then her heart gave out, and she collapsed on the toes of Cristo Redentor, useless at 30, having stored a metropolis that could in no way know it needed saving. They found her frame at sunrise, an excursion manual who'd had a coronary heart assault on the mountain, tragic however now not suspicious. The research concluded she'd been beneath strain, had a rise at night alone, had suffered cardiac arrest. Her journals were discovered, but brushed off because the ravings of a person having a breakdown. Her snapshots showed not anything uncommon. Cristo Redentor stands nowadays because it has in view that 1931, hands outstretched, blessing Rio de Janeiro. Travelers photograph it, climb to look it, marvel at its scale and beauty. If it weeps every so often at night time, if moisture runs from its eyes during storms properly, it's simply condensation, just the stone reacting to climate. The structural engineers who take a look at it every few years record it's in exquisite circumstance. showing everyday age-associated put on however not anything concerning. The cracks Maria saw exist handiest in archives nobody reads, in photos filed away and forgotten. However, a few nights, when the city under is specially troubled, whilst violence flares in the favelas or tragedy strikes, the statue's face seems more sorrowful than ordinary. The outstretched arms seem weighted with burden in preference to supplying blessing. And if you stand at its base at 3 a.m., you might hear whispers, faint prayers trapped in stone, slowly gathering again, building toward some future breaking point. The archdiocese in no way achieved the renewal ceremony. It remains forgotten, misplaced to bureaucratic chaos and institutional reminiscence. The statue keeps to soak up prayers, to accumulate grief, to function Rio's silent confessor. Maria's journals have been subsequently donated to a library, filed below folklore and urban legends. The priest has no information. He existed outdoor legit documentation for see you later that any evidence of his presence changed into lost many years in the past. Handiest, the statue recollects them, two souls who sacrificed themselves to save you disaster. And the statue holds that reminiscence along with the whole lot else. All the prayers, all of the grief, all of the collected suffering of a town constructed on beauty and inequality, joy and desperation, birthday celebration and violence. Cristo Redentor stands, hands extensive, stone face serene. And if you pay attention closely on quiet nights, you may listen it weeping. The tears are real, although no person believes there. The grief is there, even supposing no one acknowledges it. And one day, many years from now or centuries, the statue will attain its limit once more. The prayers will gather past bearing. The cracks will spread. And who could be there to channel the discharge, to sacrifice themselves for a city that doesn't believe in what they see? The statue waits, affected person as stone, accumulating prayers like rain collects in a cup, slowly filling over decades, until in the future it overflows. Cristo Redentor weeps for Rio de Janeiro. And no person notices. Until they do. Till it is too late. Until the stone breaks and the amassed grief of generations floods out, drowning a city in sorrows it refused to acknowledge. But this night the statue stands intact. The prayers are held, the grief is contained. For now. Continually for now. The favela that grows. Urban planner Lucas Mendes were hired by means of the metropolis to map the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, the usage of satellite imagery and drone pictures. It changed into tedious paintings, hundreds of casual settlements sprawling throughout hillsides, their maze-like streets defying traditional cartography. But one favela stuck his attention for all the incorrect motives. It seemed on satellite TV for PC photos from 2023, a small cluster of structures on a hillside in Zona Norte, far from the traveler areas. Not anything uncommon, besides that it didn't exist in any preceding surveys. Not in 2020, now not in 2015, not in any ancient records going returned a long time. It had honestly appeared, fully fashioned, as if it had constantly been there. Complexo de Sombra, the locals known as it when Lucas asked around. The shadow complex. Nobody knew while it had been constructed. No person admitted to residing there, but every person knew someone who knew a person who'd long gone inner and by no means come out. Superstição, Lucas muttered. Superstition. Favelas regarded and grew all the time in Rio, illegal creation, migrants in search of housing, groups forming overnight. The bureaucratic records had been notoriously incomplete. This changed into simply every other gap inside the documentation. However, the satellite snapshots troubled him. He pulled up a chain spanning 5 years. In January 2018, nothing, simply empty hillside. In June 2018, nonetheless nothing. In January 2019, a small cluster of homes. In June 2019, the cluster had doubled. By way of 2020, a complete community of maybe 100 systems. With the aid of 2023, over 500 sprawling throughout the hillside like a cancerous increase. The boom price become impossible. Even the fastest developing favelas took a long time to reach that size. Complexo de Sombra had achieved it in 5 years. Lucas decided to go to in character. His colleagues warned in opposition to it. The favela wasn't on any legitimate maps, wasn't claimed by using any gangs they knew of, had no network leadership that all and sundry may want to touch. It become, in every significant manner, off the grid. He went anyway, bringing his digital camera, GPS tracker, and a healthful admire for hazard. The drive took him through an increasing number of difficult neighborhoods, past the ultimate of the marked streets, up a dirt street that deteriorated into a path. And then he noticed it. Complexo de Sombra, growing up the hillside in the chaotic geometry of favela creation. Concrete homes in numerous states finishing touch, corrugated steel roofs, electric wires strung among buildings, narrow alleys winding upward. It gave the impression of some other favela, except for the silence. No kids gambling within the alleys, no song drifting from home windows, no traders promoting from storefronts, no sound of motorcycles, mills, televisions, just silence, thick and unnatural. Lucas checked his GPS. The device changed into malfunctioning, showing his place as a clean space at the map, now not unknown but actually blank, as though the location did not exist in any database. He took out his smartphone to file this. No sign. The digital camera worked at the least. He started photographing, running his manner into the favela's slender streets. The homes have been inhabited. He should see furnishings via windows, garments putting on strains, dishes in sinks. But he noticed no people, not one. The alleys twisted and became, climbing the hillside in patterns that did not pretty make feel. Lucas tried to maintain his sense of course, tried to map the layout mentally. However, the favela appeared to shift around him. Alleys he'd just walked down weren't there when he appeared lower back. Houses he'd photographed seemed in extraordinary places whilst he exceeded them again. Allah, he referred to as out. Hey, all of us here. His voice echoed surprisingly, as though the concrete walls absorbed sound as opposed to reflected it. No response, no movement, simply the oppressive silence. Lucas became a nook and stopped useless. The alley ahead was blocked by a wall, not a house, only a wall, fabricated from the same concrete as the whole lot else but blanketed in something that made his skin move slowly. Handprints, hundreds of them, pressed into the moist concrete earlier than it had dried. Small fingers, big hands, all overlapping, all reaching upward as if looking to climb the wall. He photographed it, then reached out to touch one of the prints. The concrete became nonetheless barely soft, pliable, as if it hadn't fully cured no matter searching many years vintage. And it was warm, frame temperature heat. A sound at the back of him made him spin round. A girl stood at the entrance to the alley, middle-aged, sporting simple garments, her face expressionless. She hadn't been there a moment ago. "Vou querer estar perdido," she requested. "Are you lost?" "I am mapping the place," Lucas replied, trying to sound expert regardless of his racing heart. "For the town. Do you live right here?" "All of us stay here," the female said. Her voice was flat, impassive. "We have constantly lived right here. We will always live here." "How lengthy has this favela existed?" "Forever, seeing that before the town, considering that earlier than the Portuguese, given that before." She tilted her head, the motion oddly mechanical. "You should not be here. The favela would not like visitors. It prefers to develop on its personal." "What do you imply, develop?" The woman smiled, a terrible expression, too wide, too empty. "You will see. You are right here now. You are part of it now." She turned and walked away, disappearing round a corner. Lucas observed, but whilst he reached the corner, she became gone. The alley extended ahead of him, but it regarded different now, longer, the homes on both aspect taller, pressing in closer. He turned into lost. Absolutely, hopelessly lost. The GPS was vain, his smartphone became useless, and the favela's format stored converting. He'd try and retrace his steps and discover himself in regions he'd in no way visible earlier than. The streets twisted again on themselves, main him in circles or spirals or some topology that rejected ordinary geometry. And the handprints had been everywhere. On partitions, on doorways, on the floor. A few have been sparkling, the concrete nonetheless gentle. Others looked ancient, weathered via decades of rain. They all reaching, grasping, as if the favela itself turned into manufactured from petrified fingers. Hours handed. Lucas climbed stairs that caused more stairs, walked alleys that opened onto other alleys, handed homes that each one seemed same. His water changed into going for walks low. His digital camera battery become demise, and he still hadn't observed a way out. As sundown approached, he heard it for the first time. Voices, whispers certainly, coming from in the houses. Now not Portuguese, something older, something that sounded like no language he'd ever heard, but which he by some means understood. New fabric, new increase. The favela expands. Lucas approached one of the homes, peering through a window. Inside, he saw them, dozens of human beings, standing immobile, dealing with the walls. Their arms were pressed against the concrete, arms spread, bodies rigid. As he watched, the walls regarded to drift round their arms, soaking up them slowly, pulling them into the shape. They were becoming part of the favela. Literally. Their bodies had been being incorporated into the concrete, turning into building material, turning into the walls and floors and foundations. Lucas stumbled backward, horrified. The female he'd seen earlier regarded at the quid of the alley. "Now you understand," she said. "The favela grows, it's continually grown, not by means of creation but via intake. It takes human beings, the lost, the forgotten, those who wander too near, and it makes them into itself. Each wall is our bodies, each floor is bones. Each house is built from folks that could not break out. It's impossible." "Is it? Study your palms." Lucas appeared down. His hands have been included in concrete dust. However, not dust, it turned into developing, spreading across his pores and skin like crystalline increase, hardening into stone. He tried to comb it off, but it clung, accelerated, started to creep up his hands. "The favela touched you," the lady said. "The moment you entered, the moment you pressed your hand against that wall, now you're part of it. The concrete acknowledges you as material. It's going to take hours, perhaps days, however ultimately you may prevent shifting. You'll stand towards a wall someplace, and the concrete will waft around you, and you'll end up another house, another room, some other enlargement of Complexo de Sombra." Lucas ran. He didn't care about path anymore, just ran through the twisting alleys, looking desperately for and go out, for the edge of the favela, for any way out. However, the streets kept converting, kept leading him deeper, and the concrete turned into spreading, creeping up his hands, hardening into stone. He exceeded others now, humans in numerous stages of incorporation. A few were still ordinarily flesh, status inflexible in opposition to partitions, slowly sinking into concrete. Others were half absorbed, their bodies merged with the shape, faces frozen in everlasting expressions of terror or resignation. And some have been nearly absolutely long gone, simply shapes in the partitions, hints of human form preserved in stone. Nighttime fell and the favela got here alive, no longer with humans but with the houses themselves. Walls breathed, flooring pulsed. The complete structure moved like a reciting issue, growing, increasing, consuming. Lucas heard creation sounds all around him, hammering, blending, building, but saw no person running. The favela became building itself, using the bodies it had absorbed as fabric. He located a house that regarded newer than the others, its concrete nonetheless smooth. Internal, he noticed a own family, mom, father, 2 kids, all standing towards distinctive partitions, all being slowly absorbed. Their eyes had been open, conscious, experiencing the technique. They could not speak, couldn't flow, could simplest stand and be ate up whilst attention remained. The horror of it broke something in Lucas. He'd notioned they died first, that incorporation befell after loss of life. However, no, they have been alive at some stage in, conscious as our bodies were transformed into constructing material, as their flesh have become concrete, as their bones have become rebar. "Help me understand," he begged the lady, who regarded beside him as though she'd been there all along. "What's this area? Why does it exist?" "The favela is old," she stated. "Older than Rio, older than Brazil, older than the Portuguese who located this land. It's been right here forever in one shape or another, a hungry location, an increase that feeds on human presence. The indigenous people knew approximately it, built their villages a ways from this hillside. The Portuguese averted it. However, as Rio grew, as people became determined for housing, some came here besides, and the favela fed, and grew, and have become what you see now. How did you live on? Why aren't you being absorbed? I'm absorbed, the female stated. She pressed her hand towards a wall, and it sank into the concrete as if the wall had been liquid. She pulled it out once more entire. I have been a part of the favela for 60 years. I was one of the first who came here looking for someplace to stay. It took me, made me part of its shape. But a number of us, it continues mobile, able to move through the concrete, to walk the streets, to entice others in. We are not alive, no longer anymore. We're extensions of the favela itself, organs of a larger organism. Lucas checked out his fingers. The concrete had unfolded to his elbows now, the skin underturning gray, hardening. He should sense it in his chest too, crystals forming in his lungs, his ribs beginning to petrify. How do I stop it? You do not, no one does. The favela grows, that's what it does. That is all it does. The female tilted her head. You ought to pick out your region soon, where you need to turn out to be part of the shape. A wall, a ground, a basis. The favela will use you somewhere. Higher to pick than to have it selected for you. Lucas refused to just accept it. He stored shifting, save trying to find an exit, while the concrete unfolded across his frame. His legs had been stiffening, his joints seizing up. Walking became hard, then agonizing, then almost impossible. He climbed to the highest point he ought to attain, hopping to look over the favela to spot a way out. From the top of a half-finished residence, he appeared out over Complexo de Sombra and saw the truth. The favela became growing. Whilst he watched, new homes were rising from the floor, pushing up like plants, built from the bodies of those being absorbed underneath. The alleys were rearranging, increasing, creating new passages that led nowhere or to extra of the equal. And at the rims, he could see human beings, real people from the town, coming near, drawn by interest or desperation or the diffused pull the favela exerted on those close by. They might end up material, just like him, similar to everybody who'd ever entered Complexo de Sombra. Lucas attempted to climb down to warn them, but his legs gave out. The concrete had spread too a ways. He collapsed against a wall, not able to move, and felt the concrete flowing around him, accepting him, beginning to contain his body into the shape. He attempted to scream, but the concrete became in his throat now, his lungs, turning his flesh to stone. His attention remained. He could nevertheless suppose, still sense, nonetheless enjoy. But he couldn't flow, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand and be slowly absorbed into the wall. The town's missing humans record on Lucas Mendes turned into filed and forgotten, just every other disappearance in a town where humans vanished each day. His drone pictures and snapshots were recovered from his car, parked at the bottom of the hill. The photographs confirmed nothing unusual, simply every other favela, unremarkable, normal. Except the satellite snapshots kept updating. Complexo de Sombra kept growing. By means of 2024, 600 structures. Through 2025, 800. The growth was accelerating, the favela spreading faster now, achieving tentacles of concrete down the hillside closer to the city proper. More human beings went lacking within the location. Now not many, simply enough to not entice attention, to look like regular city disappearance rates. However, each one fed the boom, became fabric, allowed the favela to amplify. Metropolis planners mentioned the boom with challenge. They debated intervention, demolition, incorporation into the formal city. But each group sent to evaluate Complexo de Sombra got here returned with careworn reports. The favela regarded normal to them. Simply houses, just streets. Not anything uncommon. They noticed no human beings, however assumed the residents have been without a doubt shy, wary of government officers. Not one of the assessment groups went lacking. The favela was selective, took handiest folks who got here on my own, who wouldn't be immediately missed, whose disappearance may be explained away. And it kept developing. Lucas Mendes exists now as a part of a wall in a house near the favela's middle. His body is concrete, his bones are rebar. His attention is trapped in stone, conscious, experiencing, not able to do whatever however feel the passage of time and the sluggish boom of the shape round him. He feels new people being brought, new bodies being integrated into the expanding favela. He senses their terror, their resignation, their eventual recognition. He's a part of a collective now, a hive thoughts of trapped consciousness woven through concrete, all of them constructing cloth for something historic and hungry that wears the form of a favela, however, is something else entirely. From time to time, vacationers take pics from a distance, capturing the sprawling informal agreement at the hillside. Once in a while, newshounds write articles about the speedy increase of informal housing in Rio. From time to time, lecturers take a look at the phenomenon, writing papers approximately urbanization and inequality. None of them get near enough to be absorbed. The favela is affected person. It would not need to feed constantly. Just sufficient to develop, just enough to enlarge, simply enough to slowly devour the hillside and then, finally, to reach the metropolis under. In his wall, Lucas attempts to scream warnings, tries to attain out to the dwelling. However, he's concrete now, simply another part of Complexo de Sombra, just any other element of the shape that grows and could preserve growing till the complete hillside is fed on, and then the following hillside, after which the city itself. The favela that grows. The favela that feeds. The favela so one can in no way forestall increasing. Complexo de Sombra stands on its hillside, silent and hungry, looking forward to the subsequent lost soul to wander into its maze of concrete and our bodies. And it will wait all the time, as it has all the time in the global. As it's been right here in view that before Rio, considering before the Portuguese, when you consider that before. And it will likely be right here long after. Developing. Always developing. Built from the our bodies of the forgotten, the lost, the curious. Built from people like Lucas Mendes, who concept they have been mapping the favela, however, were genuinely simply turning into its subsequent constructing fabric. The satellite pictures replace every month. The favela grows every month. And no one who subjects notices, or cares, or believes that something is wrong. Because it's simply some other favela. Just another informal agreement. Just another a part of Rio's complex urban landscape. Not anything to see here. Nothing to worry. Simply concrete and steel and stone. And if occasionally, overdue at night, human beings taking walks close to the base of that specific hillside pay attention sounds, whispers in languages that predate Portuguese, the grinding of concrete in opposition to flesh, the gradual respiration of houses made from our bodies. Nicely, they hurry beyond. They don't inspect. They don't pass searching. Because every person in Rio knows there are locations you don't cross, places that exist at the edges of the town, places which are higher left on my own. Complexo de Sombra is one of these locations. The favela that grows. Under Copacabana, marine archaeologist Dr. Elena Cardoso had determined something impossible in Guanabara Bay. The sonar readings confirmed systems, large, geometric, truly synthetic, lying 200 meters underneath the surface, simply offshore from Copacabana seashore. Structures that predated Portuguese colonization by using lots of years. It is no longer feasible, her colleague Rafael stated, studying the pics. There has been no civilization in Brazil capable of constructing something like this, now not underwater, not at that depth. Then who built it? Elena requested, though she already suspected the answer would exchange the whole lot they knew approximately South American history. She'd secured funding for a deep-sea expedition, assembled a small crew, and chartered a studies vessel. Now, at dawn, they motored out beyond the enduring curved seaside, beyond the travelers and surfers who had no concept what lay under their playground. The dive itself became recurring. Elena had finished loads. The submersible descended via darkening water, lighting cutting through the murk, till the systems emerged from the gloom. They had been pyramids, 3 of them organized in a super triangle, each one without difficulty 50 meters tall. The stone was covered in barnacles and coral, but below the marine boom, Alina could see carved surfaces, symbols, writing in a script she didn't recognize. "This is outstanding," she breathed into the comms. "These systems are historic, pre-Columbian, in all likelihood pre-ceramic. We're looking at a civilization that..." The submersible's lighting flickered. Alina frowned, checking the strength structures. The entirety showed every day, but the lights stored strobing, and in the moments of darkness between flashes, she noticed something that made her blood freeze. The pyramids were glowing, faint bioluminescence spreading across their surfaces, following the carved channels like veins lighting fixtures up with phosphorescent blood. And the symbols, they have been transferring, shifting, rearranging themselves into new patterns. "Rafkel, are you seeing this?" Static answered her. The comms had reduced out. Alina tried to convey the submersible lower back up, but the controls had been unresponsive. She changed into drifting down, pulled by a cutting edge that shouldn't exist at this intensity, drawn towards the pyramids. The submersible settled at the sandy backside among of the systems. Through the viewport, Alina saw a gap, a doorway not possible at this intensity, not possible underwater, but undeniably there. And from that doorway came light, heat, and golden, as if the solar was shining in the pyramid. Alina knew she ought to live inside the submersible, must await rescue, must observe every protocol. However, she devoted her lifestyles to know how the beyond, to uncovering misplaced civilizations. This become the invention of the century, probable of all time. She checked her diving suit's integrity, then flooded the airlock and stepped out into the deep. The strain should have crushed her immediately at 200 meters. However, around the pyramids, the water felt distinct, thinner, less dense, as if she turned into in shallow water in place of the deep ocean. She walked in the direction of the glowing doorway, every step feeling surreal, not possible. The indoors of the pyramid was dry. Absolutely, impossibly dry. Alina stood in a sizable chamber with partitions covered within the same shifting symbols she'd seen outdoor. The golden light got here from channels in the floor, packed with some luminescent substance that flowed like water, however glowed like fire. "Bemvinda," a voice stated. "Welcome." Alina spun around. A parent stood inside the doorway, humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with pores and skin that rippled like water and eyes that meditated light like a fish's. It wore something that would have been apparel or could have been part of its frame, decorated with shells and coral and things that moved with their own life. "What are you?" Alina whispered. "We are the primary," the parent stated in Portuguese that sounded historic, as though the language itself turned into being reconstructed from older roots. "We were here earlier than the land rose, earlier than the mountains grew, earlier than people climbed down from trees. We built our cities underneath the waves, and we watched as the arena changed above us." You're now not human." "No, we're older, plenty older. We watched the continents waft, watched species upward thrust and fall, watched the sea declare land and provide it lower back. We constructed these pyramids as markers, as warnings, as locks." "Locks?" The figure moved nearer, and Alina saw that it wasn't strolling, however flowing, its decreased frame dissolving into water and reforming with each step. "The ocean is deeper than you understand, no longer in distance, however in layers. Your science measures depth in meters and pressure. But there are different depths of time, of fact, of areas that exist between the waves. We came from those depths long ago, and we sealed the way in the back of us. These pyramids are the seal." Alina sponsored away, her thoughts struggling to technique this. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the seal is breaking. For 10,000 years, we've got maintained it, stored closed the passages among the deep ocean and the floor world. But we are fatting. Our civilization is ending. Quickly, there might be none folks left to maintain the barriers. And when we are long gone, what's beneath will upward thrust." "What's underneath?" The discern gestured to the floor where the sparkling channels pulsed with increasing depth. "The antique tide, that is what we call it. An ocean below the ocean, older and darker and hungry. It presses against our seals constantly, looking to rise, to flood the floor world, to reclaim the whole thing for the deep. Those pyramids and others like them round the world, they keep it returned. However, they require protection. They require guardians, and we are demise. As if to show the factor, the determined started out to dissolve, its form becoming greater liquid, much less stable. It stabilized with seen attempt, reforming itself with what seemed like tremendous ache. This is why you delivered me right here, Alina realized. You need someone to take over, to grow to be the new father or mother. Sure, you determined us. You have been curious sufficient, courageous enough, silly sufficient. The pyramids called to you, drew you here. They've been attempting to find decades, sending out diffused alerts, hoping someone might answer. And you probably did. I cannot. I'm human. I cannot stay underwater, can't preserve systems I don't apprehend. You'll alternate, the discern said. As we changed, lengthy ago, whilst we customary guardianship from those who came before us, the sea could remake you. Adapt you, provide you with what you need to satisfy the function. You'll live centuries, perhaps millennia, maintaining lower back the old tide, maintaining the deep ocean from growing. And if I refuse? The determined became silent for a moment. Then we fade, the seals fail, and the vintage tide rises. Inside a year, perhaps much less, the ocean will begin to alternate. The water will become thicker, darker, packed with matters that have to no longer exist for your fact. The beaches will empty as human beings feel the wrongness. The fish will die. The currents will opposite. And then the old tide will spill onto land, and everything coastal can be fed on, transformed into extensions of the deep ocean, where truth follows exceptional guidelines and people can't survive. Your mendacity, you're seeking to control me. Look, the discern commanded. The walls became obvious, displaying now not the ocean outside, however, something else, a vision or a memory or a prophecy. Alina noticed cities underwater, but now not ruins. Energetic towns, impossibly vast, built in architectural patterns that harm her eyes to perceive. And the water around them become wrong, black and thick, packed with shapes that moved with horrible motive. She noticed the vintage tide rising, noticed it spilling onto coastal lands, noticed Rio de Janeiro fed on, the seashores dissolving, the homes reworking into coral-encrusted towers, the people converting or dying or worse, becoming matters tailored to the deep ocean, losing their humanity to the crushing darkness. That is what comes if the seals fail, the figure said. That is what we've got averted for 10,000 years. This is what you have to save you now. Alina fell to her knees, crushed. I cannot. I have an existence, a own family, research. You have a preference. All of us who unearths us has a desire. Receive guardianship and keep your international. Refuse and condemn it. The parent turned into barely retaining form now, more water than flesh. I cannot last an awful lot longer. The transformation that made me mother or father is eventually failing. Pick out speedy. How long? Alina asked. How long could I must serve? Until the following father or mother is discovered. Decades. Centuries. The sea is patient. It'll locate a person eventually. However, it can take time. And in the course of that time, you'll be alone within the deep, keeping seals you barely recognize, preserving lower back forces that predate life itself. Alina thought of her daughter, 8 years antique, who desired to be a marine biologist like her mother. She notion of Raphael, her colleague and pal, who turned into probable panicking right now, trying to figure out what had happened to her. She idea of Rio, Copacabana, Ipanema, the bay, the beaches, all the life and color and humanity that thrived at the coast. She concept of it all fed on by the old tide, converted into extensions of the deep ocean, misplaced all the time. If I take delivery of, she said slowly, can I ever go lower back? Am I able to ever see my own family again? No, the parent said, and there has been real sorrow in its voice. Guardianship is absolute. You'll emerge as something else, something adapted to the deep. You could not live on land. You couldn't breathe air. You would spend the rest of your existence here within the depths, alone with the pyramids and the seals and the consistent stress of the antique tide attempting to interrupt through. It's no longer a desire. It is a prison sentence. Sure, the determined agreed. Guardianship is imprisonment, but it is imprisonment that saves worlds. We were prisoners for 10,000 years. Now we ask you to take our place. Elena checked out the dissolving determine on the sparkling channels in the ground, at the walls showing visions of the vintage tide. She idea about strolling, approximately looking to attain her submersible, approximately escaping to the floor and pretending this had in no way befell. But she knew the reality. If she left, the seals might fail. The vintage tide would upward push, and everyone she cherished, every body in every coastal town around the sector, would suffer the outcomes of her cowardice. How do I do it? She requested quietly. How do I emerge as a father or mother? The figure gestured to one of the glowing channels. Input the flow. Allow it change you. The transformation takes 3 days. It is going to be painful. Your body may be unmade and remade, adapted to the deep, bonded to the pyramids. However, while it is entire, you may recognize your responsibilities. You will recognize the way to keep the seals. You becomes one with the ocean at its private level. Elena approached the channel. The sparkling substance flowed beyond, warm and inviting in spite of its alien nature. She ought to sense it calling to her, promising transformation, promising reason, promising and cease to uncertainty. She concept of her daughter one final time. Concept of how she'd give an explanation for Mommy's disappearance. Misplaced at sea, diving coincidence. A tragedy, however, not uncommon in marine archaeology. She stepped into the go with the flow. The transformation was discomfort. Elena felt her body dissolving, cellular with the aid of cellular, being broken all the way down to its molecular additives and rebuilt in line with new specifications. Her lungs collapsed and reformed into structures that might extract oxygen from water. Her bones hollowed and bolstered, adapting to stress. Her skin became clean and reflective, taking on the advent of the parent she became replacing. For 3 days she existed in liquid affliction, neither fully human nor completely transformed, caught within the area among. She screamed, however the sound came out as bubbles. She attempted to break out, but the glide held her, inexorable, completing its paintings. When it ultimately launched her, Elena turned into modified. She seemed down at herself and saw palms that were webbed and elongated, skin that rippled with bioluminescent styles, a frame that changed into still recognizably hers, but tailored in methods that made her alien even to herself. She attempted to speak and located she may want to. The phrases got here out as vibrations in the water, comprehensible notwithstanding, having no air to carry them. What have I turned out to be? The parent turned into almost long past now, only a vague shape inside the water. A parent, the brand new dad or mum, we thank you to your provider. After which it dissolved absolutely, becoming not anything more than water. Its 10,012 months vigil eventually ended. Elena changed into on my own. She felt the pyramids now, felt them as extensions of herself. She ought to sense the seals they maintained, the barriers between the floor ocean and the vintage tide beneath. She felt that antique tide urgent upward constantly, testing the bounds. Probing for weaknesses, it becomes significant, historical, malevolent in its starvation to upward thrust. And she understood her duty. To keep the boundaries, to restore the seals once they cracked, to preserve lower back the darkness for as long as she could, till a brand new mother or father turned into discovered. She swam through the pyramid, mastering its passages, its mechanisms, the channels of glowing substance that powered the seals. She felt other pyramids too, dozens of them, scattered across the sea floor worldwide, all connected, all part of the equal machine. Different guardians maintained them, even though communique turned into limited, just faint pulses of focus acknowledging each other's lifestyles across thousands of miles of deep ocean. Elena settled into her new life. She patrolled the pyramids, monitored the seals, achieved preservation rituals she now understood instinctively. She watched the floor through the limitations, noticed ships passing overhead, noticed swimmers and surfers playing in the shallows of Copacabana seashore, all of them blind to what lay under. Time exceeded surprisingly inside the deep. Days felt like hours. Weeks felt like days. She lost track of how long she'd been down right here. Months, years, her experience of human time dissolved, changed with the aid of the sluggish rhythms of the sea. She concept approximately her daughter much less and much less, the recollections fading like old images. She idea approximately Raphael every so often, wondered if he'd published papers about her discovery, about the pyramids. She idea approximately her antique existence, her research, her ambitions. All of it felt distant now, inappropriate, as though it had passed off to a person else. She changed into the mother or father. That become all. That was the entirety. The old tide pressed upward, and she held it lower back. On the floor, existence continued. Elena Cardoso become declared dead after her submersible turned into recovered, empty and broken, showing signs and symptoms of catastrophic pressure failure. Her frame changed into by no means determined. A memorial carrier turned into held. Her daughter cried. Raphael published a paper on the pyramid systems, although most of the instructional community brushed off them as herbal formations misidentified with the aid of sonar. Copacabana Beach remained crowded with travelers. Human beings swam in the warm water, unaware of the historic structures underneath, blind to the mother or father keeping again forces they could not comprehend. However, some nights, while the moon was complete and the tide turned into particularly high, human beings stated seeing lighting within the water, bioluminescent patterns sparkling deep underneath the surface. And some swimmers felt it, a presence within the deep, something sizable and watchful, something that kept them safe even though they failed to understand from what. Elena served her time. Decades exceeded, or centuries, she no longer distinguished. She maintained the seals, held back the vintage tide, saved the surface global safe from the darkness below. And he or she waited, hoped, that in the future any other curious explorer would locate the pyramids, could be drawn down into the deep, would be brave enough or silly enough to simply accept guardianship and release her from her everlasting duty. She waited for a person to save her, as she had stored the arena. However, the ocean is widespread, and the pyramids are hidden, and people who might discover them are few. So Elena waits nevertheless, swimming via the darkness, maintaining ancient seals, holding return the vintage tide or after 12 months after 12 months. Beneath Copacabana, within the deep ocean in which humans do not project, the guardian keeps her vigil. And the world above remains secure, ignorant, unaware that they owe their life to a woman who gave up the entirety, her existence, her humanity, her future, to emerge as a prisoner in the deep, keeping returned the darkness all the time. The seashores are stunning, the water is heat, the vacationers are happy. And underneath them, inside the crushing darkness, Elena Cardoso holds the line between the world and the abyss. She is the mother or father. She can usually be the parent, till a person else takes her area, till a person else unearths the pyramids and accepts the transformation and takes up the everlasting burden. Till then, she waits within the deep, by myself however useful, modified however unbroken, human no longer however more than she ever turned into. The sea maintains its secrets and techniques, and Elena Cardoso is certainly one of them. Lost below Copacabana, mum or dad of the deep, prisoner of the vintage tide, savior of an international on the way to by no means realize her sacrifice,